The hefty biology instructor, Takahashi Tetsuo, idly lounges in the teacher's lounge when a coworker reveals there's a new addition to the faculty. Another colleague questions him about his studies on demi-humans. Takahashi had thought about penning a college thesis on the subject, but actually interacting with these rare beings is complicated. Just then, a woman bursts in, citing her late train as the reason for her tardiness. Although Takahashi acknowledges that delays happen, he's skeptical about her packed train excuse. Dressed in a tracksuit, the woman identifies herself as the new math teacher, Satusaki, and also a demi-human succubus. Takahashi is thrilled. He has finally encountered a demi-human. These demi-humans are not entirely different from the mythological beings often referenced in folklore. They're simply individuals with special abilities. Although they have faced bias in the past, society has become more accepting recently, and there's even a support system for them. As students ready the halls for Shizaki High's inaugural ceremony, Takahashi spots Satu and chooses to approach her, startling her greatly. Intent on making her acquaintance, she hurriedly warns him that, being a succubus, she must actively prevent provoking inappropriate thoughts, hence her distance from people. She reminds him that he was glaring at her earlier, and before he could clarify, she asks him to go away using a ladder as a barrier. Days later, in the restroom, he attempts to offer an apology. Sasua, however, interrupts him, keeps a physical gap, and plays the "it's not me, it's you" card before awkwardly exiting. His research hopes are crushed. Out of nowhere, a playful blonde student shouts for help. Takahashi recognizes her. They'd met the previous night when she was at the school very late. She had bolted without explanation, leaving him puzzled. She now clarifies that she's new and was merely eager to don her new school clothes. She adds that any young girl would flee if approached by a strange older man. As Takahashi privately grapples with being labeled an old man, the girl assertively states, with unfiltered, gleeful arrogance, that he should be lauding her for her quick wits. While she's laughing away, Takahashi points out her prior cry for help, causing her to suddenly remember why she sought him out. She identifies herself as Takanashi Hikari, a student from Class 1B, and says a fellow student has fainted. She approached Takahashi believing he was the health instructor. "I'm actually the biology educator, but no matter," says Takahashi. "I can assess a student's well-being with just a glance at their face." SHEHS. Indeed, Takahashi's confidence evaporates when he encounters the unconscious student, who has flames erupting from her neck instead of a head. Hikari seems entirely nonplussed and remarks, of course, she's a Dullahan. Dullahans are a kind of demi-human with detachable heads. Hikari had already taken the head to the nurse's office. The body was too cumbersome, hence Takahashi's involvement. He's flabbergasted. Just then, other students walk by carrying a stretcher with an ailing snow woman. Now he's met 3. As he hoists the Dullahan's body, he questions Hikari about her seeming nonchalance toward these unique beings. Turns out, she's a demi-human herself, a vampire. For those counting, that makes FOUR demi-humans, and to think he just told his coworker he'd never met one. Hikari then briefs him on her friend's conditions. The Dullahan has a cold, and the snow woman suffered heat exhaustion during gym class. Observing his puzzled demeanor, she inquires if he has an issue with demi-humans. Far from it. He's thrilled. He'd done so much just to meet them, all to no avail until now. "So you're saying you're delighted to have met me?" Hikari questions, eyes widening. More than delighted, he's ecstatic, causing Hikari to flash a supremely self-satisfied grin. Before parting, she advises him that the term demi-humans is passé. Trendy high school girls like her prefer demi. The following day, Takahashi observes Hikari amiably chatting with a redhead. She turns out to be her sibling from Class C, Takanashi Himari. They're identical twins. Takahashi inquires if Himari is also a demi, but she's not. Although Takahashi is still fascinated by demis, he doesn't want to make it awkward. So, hiss it and lie, he asks if Hikari would be willing to satisfy his curiosities about vampires. She agrees, which delights Takahashi. In exchange, she requests permission to spend time in the biology storage room. Takahashi has discovered that demis are more often the result of mutations rather than heredity, explaining how one twin could be a demi. However, he still lacks an understanding of their daily lives, how they socialize, think, or other such intricate personal details. But observing Hikari comfortably lounging in the biology room, he notes that vampires tend to get warm quickly. Another point is that Hikari appreciates the dim lighting in the biology room, as she doesn't want her classmates to make changes for her sake. Now comes the interview. Takahashi hands her a vampire encyclopedia to fact-check its claims. Garlic. She's a fan. Crucifixes. Totally passé. A wooden stake to the heart. That would indeed be fatal for vampires. but Takahashi adds that it would kill humans as well. When asked about the necessity of blood for survival, Hikari contends it's not absolutely essential. She likens it to anemia, where one is deficient in red blood cells. Vampires experience a similar condition, making them sensitive to sunlight. Proper diet should help. They do still crave blood, and the government supplies one blood pack a month to assist their dietary needs. Those who abstain from blood are akin to vegetarians. Vegetarians, you say? Fans of Twilight, take note? Takahashi then wonders if Hikari has ever considered obtaining blood directly. After all, couldn't she create thralls or even other vampires with her fangs? Hikari admits she's been tempted to bite the Snow Woman because of her icy, comforting presence. She can only speculate how warm the Snow Woman's blood must be in contrast to her skin. Takahashi remarks that the discussion feels inherently sensual, and judging by Hikari's response, she seems oblivious to this aspect. He questions whether she's ever been inclined to drink the blood of males. Surprisingly, Hikari hasn't. It's not a matter of gender preference, she simply hasn't felt attraction to anyone. The young vampire still harbors some apprehensions about men, which is exacerbated by her perception of the act as inherently sadistic. Furthermore, she's drawn to men who are reliable. At this juncture, Takahashi comes to understand that Hikari is at a stage in her life where she's maturing and discovering her identity. He apologizes for the tactlessness of his questions and extends his gratitude for her participation in the interview before allowing her to depart. Just as Hikari is about to exit, she abruptly pivots and lunges for his neck. Just kidding. She's wielding pencils, not fangs. Please refrain from accidentally biting me, Takahashi utters, rubbing his neck. The moment amuses Hikari, who finds the scenario unexpectedly titillating. Later, Hikari connects with the Dullahan from Class 1B, Mashi Kyoko. Hikari empathizes with the difficulties Mashi faces having to constantly carry her own head, and compares it to her own challenges with sun exposure. While others around them might find this surprising, Mashi values Hikari's candidness and in turn expresses her own sympathy for Hikari's inability to don short sleeves during hot weather. Back in the biology preparation area, Takahashi gets a visit from Mashi, albeit without her head. She hands him a letter, and on the sidelines, Hikari offers Mashi some moral support. Though initially surprised, he peruses the letter, which contains Mashi's expressions of gratitude and her openness to discussing her demi nature. May I engage in a conversation with you sometime? She queries via her written words. But hold on. How will she get his answer if her head is not present? Suddenly, she feels what is akin to a handhold from Takahashi. Realizing there's something in her palm, she grips it. The duo of girls hastily retreat to a secluded area to read the message. It says, Mashi, feel free to visit anytime. Takahashi, eliciting a smile from Mashi. For context, Mashi Kyoko is a Dullahan, an Irish demi based in folklore and characterized by a detachable head and body. With Mashi's consent, Takahashi touches the ethereal flames on her neck. To his surprise, they are not hot. Rather, they feel almost supernatural. His fascination is curtailed when he notices Mashi tearing up. The flame's manipulation affects her nervous system. She further elucidates that her head and body aren't independent entities. Astonishing Takahashi. Long periods of separation between the two don't pose an issue. For instance, her body once ended up in Tokyo via bullet train while her head was still in Okayama, bidding farewell to her grandparents. Life poses its challenges, but for Mashi, it's about trial and error, necessitating both wit and adaptability. She has devices like a harness for eating and a hanger for bath time to make life easier. Yet, Mashi admits that social interactions present the biggest hurdle. People tend to be taken aback upon seeing her, creating a palpable distance between her and her peers. While they do communicate, they generally avoid discussing her Dullahan nature. She wishes she could be more self-deprecating. Her sentiments make Takahashi pause in contemplation. As he rests his arms behind his head, Mashi is momentarily taken by his imposing stature, but she snaps back to reality as he speaks. He suggests that perhaps she should take the initiative in making light of her situation. If she desires a friendship where her Dullahan identity is openly acknowledged, she should set the tone herself. This way, others can discern what kind of humor is acceptable. In essence, it's all about who initiates. Takahashi points out that she's likely the first Dullahan these people have encountered, given that only 3 exist, showcasing his own research. While he speaks, however, Mashi's gaze keeps drifting to his robust, reassuring arms. An idea seems to flash across her mind, but she finds it exceedingly hard to articulate her thoughts. Finally, she tells Takahashi he's welcome to decline her next request, which turns out to be for a hug. Immediately after voicing this, flames erupt from her neck with a chilling howl. Shocking as it is, what Mashi really wishes for is for him to cradle her head. And so Takahashi does just that, tenderly holding her head in his arms. Mashi confides that her parents used to hold her in the same manner, but ceased to do so as she matured, urging her to outgrow her yearning for such comfort. From this, Takahashi gains insight into the Dullahan condition. They are inherently communal beings who dislike solitude and easily feel lonesome. This specific Dullahan still longs for affection, but he cautions Mashi that their interaction could appear improper, given their teacher-student relationship. Just then, Hikari appears. Sporting a mischievous grin, she dashes off to spread the word about what she witnessed. Mashi jokingly comments, "So I guess you're a Dullahan now because your head will certainly roll, won't it?" Although Takahashi wasn't fond of the joke, he appreciates her effort. That night, Mashi reflects on Takahashi's kindness, hopeful for future conversations. The following day during recess, Mashi timidly confesses to Hikari that there's someone she's interested in romantically. While not necessarily a drawback, her Dullahan nature isn't a plus point either in the dating scene. When Hikari inquires about her dream date, Mashi, true to her Dullahan essence, expresses a desire to be held securely close to someone's chest. Ideally, her partner could even carry her head around and make decisions about where to go. She could have a clear view of his face, and perhaps there might be slight shifts that could bring their faces closer. Under Hikari's relentless questioning, Mashi finally divulges that the individual she's contemplating is Takahashi, their teacher. If her vision is accurate, she should notice the glaring red signal that is Hikari's please grin as she starts to dial her phone. Because he's an educator, they can't label it a date, prompting Hikari to devise a scheme and describe it as a research project that involves Takahashi. Quite crafty, Hikari informs Takahashi that for the research, he and Mashi are required to go shopping and mustn't return until dusk. In the meantime, Hikari will keep Mashi's body company, or Mashi, especially considering she had put extra effort into her attire for the day. En route to shopping, Takahashi inquires about the specific nature of their experiment. Mashi shares that it's essentially a rehearsal for a potential future outing with someone. Eventually, they find themselves sitting in a park, discussing cherry blossoms. Her azure eyes gaze up warmly at Takahashi, cherishing the time spent. Back at Hikari's residence, Mashi's body gropes for a notebook and scribbles a message. "I'm enjoying myself. Thanks, Hikari-chan." Yet to add her own twist, Hikari pokes Mashi in her chest, causing her to yelp while in Takahashi's embrace. Startled, he quickly ensures she's all right. Mashi assures him all is well. She just recollected something amusing. Her neck flames erupt and her limbs flail at Hikari in irritation. Laugh aside, the rest of their experiment proceeds smoothly. Takahashi eventually detects that Mashi is experiencing mild motion sickness, so they pause at a cafe. Apologizing for any discomfort, Takahashi listens as Mashi refers to her unsettling encounter with Yuki Kusakabe, the snow woman of Class A, the day prior. It wasn't the hug from Hikari that bothered her, it's something else she can't quite pinpoint. As they journey home, Takahashi employs a technique to make Mashi more at ease in his arms based on his academic insights. He notes that human eyes and necks instinctively align with their bodies to enhance overall comfort. In Mashi's situation, it's her limbs that perform that stabilizing function. After reuniting with her body, she expresses her gratitude to Takahashi for participating in the test and departs. However, before he can leave, Hikari confides a small piece of advice to help Mashi further. The following day near the cleaning supplies, Satsu eavesdrops on Takahashi discussing with the school head about the mandated one-hand bag. He argues that for Dullahans, using one hand for a bag and another to hold their head poses safety and convenience issues. He proposes that Mashi be permitted to use a backpack. Satsu currently glances at the duo, her gaze fixated on Takahashi's robust arms, eliciting a blush. He's not just a looker, but also deeply empathetic to his students. A subdued grin forms on her lips as she observes Mashi now donning a backpack, engaging with a seemingly astonished Takahashi about her updated style. Satsu starts her morning like most regular folks, rising at the crack of 4 a.m. completing household tasks, preparing breakfast, and tuning into the morning broadcast for her horoscope. At 24 and single, she believes the chances of a conventional relationship are slim, primarily because she's an Aquarius, and secondarily, her succubus nature plays a role. While en route to the train, she takes care not to jostle anyone. To dodge the rush hour crowd, she commutes early due to her capability to arouse desire upon physical contact. Finding herself with free time, she titties up the teacher's lounge, a gesture the principal highly appreciates. While interacting with a student, the young person can't ignore how striking she looks at close range. The student suggests that Satsu glam up even more, an idea she dismisses. For Satsu, dressing up isn't an option because as a succubus, Her seductive effect naturally captivates and ignites passion in people. Succubi are demi-humans with the unique ability to influence males in such a way. However, succubi do possess self-discipline. They make a point to dress modestly and comport themselves with dignity to deter specific thoughts from overwhelming people's minds. If any accidental contact occurs, Satsu is quick to quash it. Yet, given the way she's had to adapt her life around this capability, it's a significant hindrance. She can't even doze off during her commute home, as her powers inadvertently infiltrate the dreams of fellow train passengers, earning succubi like her the moniker Dream Fiends. It sounds ominous, but it's more bothersome than anything else. She resides far from the general populace to spare them from her zone of influence. While showering, she muses whether matrimony and starting a family would yield a more peaceful life. A whimsical thought, as she's never even had a genuine romantic connection. Could she even contemplate wedlock? As a succubus, finding a love interest wouldn't be hard. She could just glam up and step out. Men would fall at her feet, but that's not her idea of authentic love. Yet, if she does genuinely fall for a man, would that sentiment differ from the feelings she arouses in men? It's a distressing thought. However, she can at least indulge in some ale when she returns home, her lone solace. The subsequent school day, Satsu regrets overindulging in beer as she grapples with walking in a straight line due to her hangover. Losing her footing, she tumbles forward only to be saved by her coworker, Takahashi. She's stunned. He's unaffected by her powers. As for him, he simply advises her to exercise caution before departing. Physical contact occurred, yet Takahashi remained unperturbed. Could it be that her powers have no sway over him due to a lack of carnal desire? For Satsu, his apparent immunity to her capabilities is what renders him utterly alluring. If only she were aware, in truth, as soon as he's out of sight, Takahashi is exerting every effort to regain his composure, extremely grateful for maintaining his poise despite her abilities igniting an intense internal reaction. These succubi are perilous. Later that day, Takahashi is documenting his encounters with the 4 demi-humans on his computer when young Hikari materializes in front of him to scrutinize his work. She's astounded by his dedication to researching vampires like her, from their dietary habits to questions concerning the nexus between blood drinking and romantic feelings. Hikari blushes at the allusion to romance. Takahashi quickly deduces he should not have broached such a potentially awkward subject with young Hikari. Nevertheless, she immediately stands up, insisting it's not awkward at all and that she has much to say on the matter. If so, Takahashi has inquiries for her. There are rumors that vampiric blood drinking has some adult implications, but to what extent? Hikari is somewhat perplexed by what her teacher is insinuating. Takahashi then provides a scale. Is it more intimate than a kiss, but less than full-on intimacy? Hikari is so taken aback that she struggles to articulate herself. She speculates that it varies from individual to individual, but Takahashi is interested in her own unique perspective as a vampire. For scholarly purposes, the hitch is Hikari has never ventured into romance, although she's partaken in blood drinking once. Observing Hikari's deepening flush, Takahashi skillfully shifts the topic, suggesting that it truly does differ among vampires. Initially, blood drinking served as a method for vampires to compensate for their own deficiencies, a practice now rendered obsolete thanks to government-sanctioned blood pacts. Good pivot, teacher. As Takahashi mentally drafts conclusions based on this newfound information, Hikari seizes the moment, standing up to plant a kiss on his cheek. Kissing is simpler than drawing blood, she asserts. An awkward silence envelops them until Takahashi breaks it by turning to jot down her comments in his notes. Apologies, Hikari. That's just his nature. Meanwhile, we see Mashi and Satsu strolling down the corridor. Satsu, holding a box, remarks that Mashi's class instructor must be quite negligent to let her carry this burden alone. The Dullahan expresses regret as they head to the resource room, but Satsu brushes it off. Engrossed in shelving books, Mashi can't resist observing how poised and mature her teacher appears. She compliments Satsu, saying she must have quite a romantic history. Oh Mashi, if only you knew how clumsy she is. Mashi confides in her teacher, seeking guidance about a particular person she has feelings for. Satsu is touched by this display of youthful affection and queries if the object of Mashi's affections is a fellow student. Mashi stammers he's not a student, but he's affiliated with the institution. Finally, she plucks up the courage to admit, I have a crush on Takahashi-sensei. It appears Satsu harbors similar sentiments. Awkward. Elsewhere, a clique of students manages to deter Yuki after inviting her to socialize. Frustrated, Takahashi administers a sharp rap on their heads with his notebook. He's been trying to engage Yuki in conversation, and these youngsters are not aiding his cause. Yuki remains elusive. Back in the resource room, Mashi is captivated by Satu's acknowledgement that she also finds Takahashi appealing. Satu doesn't want to make this a rivalry. Mashi is still a student, after all, and she is her educator. So she offers a sympathetic ear to the young Dullahan. Mashi shares her aspiration to appear more mature for Takahashi, but is unsure how to go about it. Consequently, she seeks guidance from Satu, whom she regards as a sophisticated, experienced woman. This startles Satu. She may be a succubus, but she's hardly seasoned in the ways of the world. The math teacher approaches Mashi, revealing that the perceived maturity in her, and most adults, is not always what it seems. They maintain this facade to earn respect and appear as upstanding members of the community. Frankly, Satu considers this somewhat pretentious on their part. Nonetheless, this act is particularly crucial in the field of education. When Mashi inquires if the same applies to Satu, the succubus merely gestures for silence with her finger to her lips. It's anyone's guess. Well, she knows. Given Satu's remarks, Mashi now believes that perhaps Takahashi is also projecting a certain image. Reflecting on this, Satu notes that her age difference with Takahashi is comparable to the age gap between herself and Mashi. That said, she freely admits that she perceives Takahashi as genuinely mature. She values his laid-back, unburdened, and dependable demeanor. She admires how he can authentically engage with people without causing harm. It's truly remarkable and alluring. When Satu turns to see Mashi fixedly gazing at her, she understands she's overshared and shifts the discussion to what Mashi finds appealing in Takahashi. Mashi turns rosy and mentions that she too values his kindness and reliability. And those biceps. Ah, those biceps. Satu totally gets it. Restrain the desire, ladies. Satu quickly pivots back to discuss Mashi's appearance, suggesting perhaps a change in hairstyle. Mashi counters that growing her hair out is impractical due to handling issues. She could modify her current hairstyle, but then she remembers when Takahashi expressed delight that Mashi's Dullahan nature meant they could share similar hairstyles. The emotional impact of that moment on young Mashi was indelible, making her elated. Hence, she no longer wishes to alter her hairstyle. Mashi notices that Satu has fallen silent. Oh, that does sound lovely, Satu mutters repeatedly, before her emotions reach a crescendo. She starts to exclaim, swinging her legs emphatically. Matching hairstyles. She can't fathom being envious of her own pupil. What a whirlwind of days it has been for Takahashi. Amidst his ongoing research, will he ever grasp the emotional turbulence he incites among these demes? Likely not, until he diverts his attention from his studies, at the very least. Ah, Takahashi, my kindred spirit.